everyone, Chase Elleby and Joel Williams from Williams Elleby, and today in this video we're going to talk to you about crash reports or incident reports, which for any car wreck case is probably the single most important bit of evidence you can have because it gives you so much information. So we're going to spend some time today just talking a little bit about what that information is and why it's important to your case. So Joel, what's the first bit of really pertinent information that we get from these crash reports?
Before we get there, let's talk about how to get them.
That's a good point.
Right.
Got one in my lap right now, so you start with just having it.
So you got to know how to get it before you can access the information on it. But you're exactly right. It is the most valuable piece of information you can get from an open records request that gives you all of this stuff that you need to know to properly pursue your claim. But probably, at least in the state of Georgia, and I know this is available in other states as well, the easiest way to get a copy of the accident report is through a company called buycrash.com.
Yeah.
It's BUYCRASH.com.
Which I think was bought by Lexus.
Yeah.
But you can get it online.
That's right, yeah. But either way, as long as you have the report number, your date of birth, your driver's license number, some other information, you can easily go in there and access that and download a copy of the accident report once it's available. Other options are to request it directly from the police department or the sheriff's department or the state patrol, whoever came out and did the investigation of the wreck. And they're usually fairly cheap. I mean, you can usually get one for somewhere between $5 and $15.
Yeah.
I think it's $11 if you get it on BuyCrash. So that's how you get the accident report. Once you have it, the first thing that you can look at on there is, because you always, if you're in the wreck, you want to get the accident report and make sure the officer got everything correct, right? The first thing I would look at is the date, the time, and the place. So it will have the names of the roads where the wreck occurred. It'll have the time that the wreck was reported, the time that the officer showed up, and of course the date.
Right. Yeah, and then on top of that, you also have the parties, right? Who was involved. Shannon, our awesome video tech, will superimpose a redacted crash report so you can see. But basically, especially in Georgia, the crash reports always list on one side driver 1, the other side driver 2, and it has all the pertinent contact information, right? Name, address, date of birth, how to contact them if we need to contact them, phone numbers. Also insurance information, which is huge, right? Because anytime we get a crash report, we have to send notes to the insurance companies. So it always lists the insurance company with a policy number, so we get that information as well, which is also important too, because a lot of times we'll have clients that get, are in a wreck, they'll call us, they don't have the police report, and they're like, I have no idea, who their insurance is, I don't know what to do. Well, don't worry, it's going to be listed on the police report, because 99% of the time the police officers get that information. So,
yeah, they should get it.
Right.
And it's, sometimes it's going to give you a good starting point for where to find the insurance information. It's not necessarily always going to list all available insurance information, because imagine the situation where somebody's driving somebody else's car, or if there's other collateral policies that may apply to that vehicle that's not the primary policy. It may not be listed on there, but it will get you started on knowing the insurance companies that are involved.
Right, you bring up a good point, because a lot of times too, especially with Georgia, it'll list the driver of the vehicle, and then if the cop, the police officer does a good job investigating, they'll ask who the owner is, and they'll list the owner as well. So
yeah. Other things that will be included will be the prevailing weather conditions and roadway conditions and things like that. So lots of times, if it's a hydroplane incident or something like that, it may matter whether the roadway was wet. It may matter whether it was raining. It may matter whether there's ice or snow on the road or anything like that. So that type of information will be listed on there as well.
Yep, and they'll also do contributing factors. So contributing factors are basically what the police officer, the investigating agency, determines contributed to or caused the wreck. So they'll list certain factors. Now in Georgia, a lot of the incident reports or police reports have numbers. So I'll say like contributing factors, and it lists a specific number. And unless you have the key, you're not going to know what that number means. But you can always Google, Georgia motor vehicle overlay report, and it'll tell you what each number means on the police report. So anytime you look at a police report and you see all these numbers, there is a key out there that you can look to. But contributing factors are important. They're important for us because police officers, they're not really witnesses to the incident, but they are witnesses in the sense of investigating a wreck. So we can always ask police officers, okay, well, in your investigation, what were the contributing factors? Not necessarily what caused the wreck, but what were the contributing factors that may have led to the collision occurring. So
Yep.
that's always an important piece of information.
Yeah, and sort of related to contributing factors is if the police officer determines that one of the drivers did something wrong that was a contributing factor to the wreck, they may issue that person a citation. Probably the most common two we see would be failure to yield. You blow a stop sign, you blow a red light, or following too closely. That's kind of the catch-all. In almost every rear end collision,
Right.
we see somebody gets a citation for following too closely. But they'll list the citation and which driver the citation was assigned to. Usually the police officer, most of the time, will put who they consider to be at fault as driver one on the incident report, and then they'll issue citations to them. Sometimes they'll believe that both drivers did something that contributed to causing the wreck. They may issue citations to both people, but they're going to list that there. You'll get the citation number, which then helps you follow up with additional investigation to maybe find out from the court where that citation is pending, whether somebody paid the citation, whether they pled guilty, whether they pled nolo, whether they pled not guilty, all of that stuff. But it's a good place to go to start finding out what happened with that citation.
Right, and also too, kind of with the citation, I think it's important to note that with crash reports are separate from investigative reports. And so by that I mean, we'll have a crash report where say the at-fault driver also got arrested for DUI. Well, the crash report might list something under the contributing factors that the at-fault driver was drinking, but we won't have the actual DUI investigative report in the crash report. So you have to request that separately through an open records request, and that's where you get that information from the criminal investigation associated with that crash. And another thing to look for in the crash report itself, which you can glean more information from, is going to be the narrative portion. And that's the portion in the crash report where the investigating police officer says, or writes on the report, driver one indicated they were, falling behind driver two. As driver one stopped, driver two couldn't, stop in time and rear-ended driver one, right? So a lot of times it's really just the police officer, sort of in somewhat layman's terms, explaining what the crash was. Other times you might get, quotes saying, I spoke with driver one and driver one said, quote, I looked to the side or was checking my phone, and then when I looked up, I slammed into the back, which are helpful for us because it's an admission, right? An admission in the report that we can use when we're cross-examining them. So, or cross-examining the at-fault driver. So the narrative is very important, which sort of kind of compound or is included with the diagram. You want to talk about the diagram briefly?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. It's just a basic diagram of the layout of the roadways, how the reporting officer believes the vehicles were situated during the wreck, how it happened. There'll be little drawings of cars that'll show area of impact, which way the cars went. There'll be a symbol on there that's got north, south, east, west, so you know which way the roadways are going. But yeah, it just kind of gives you a very basic overview of the layout of the roadway and what happened with the cars.
Yeah, exactly.
Another thing before we get too far down, all this stuff's usually on the second page of the report, but one thing that I did want to mention that's specific to commercial motor vehicle cases is that if and probably most common is a tractor trailer, it's important to know what the federal motor carrier's number is, like what's their carrier number. There'll be a section in Georgia, at least, it's on the bottom left-hand side of the report, that will give you their DOT number, and then you can go on to sites like safer.gov or Safer and find out like if this carrier has a lot of other unsafe driving incidents and that kind of thing. So that doesn't apply to most wrecks, but just commercial motor vehicles, but I did want to mention that. In addition to the diagram, there'll be a section that will list any witness information.
Yeah, exactly. Witnesses, hopefully they'll have the witness's name and number. First and last name is helpful, but sometimes they'll just have a first name or not have the entire number, so we're left trying to track them down. But yeah, it's always helpful when there's witnesses. Most of the time, well, I say most of the time, most of the cases that we're helping folks out on, the liability is pretty clear what happened, but there's some times where we have to track down those witnesses, and the first place we'll go to look is going to be the police report. But we also tell folks, and I know we've said it in other videos, if there are witnesses that you have talked to at the scene, get their contact information, because there have been plenty of times we've gotten a police report and our client will have said, hey, I know there's a bunch of witnesses. I saw him talking to the police officer. We'll get the police report. No mention of any witnesses anywhere. Try to do an open records request to get the information. Nothing. So yeah, if you can get the witness information, get it. But sometimes it's going to be on the police report as well. In addition to injuries, right?
Yeah.
So if you have injuries, it might be mentioned.
I often wonder. I remember one time I was sitting in a left-hand turn lane at a red light, and I'm just waiting on my light to turn green, and it was one of those situations where my light, the left-hand turn light, was red. It was one of the arrows.
Right.
But the light to go straight through the intersection was green, right? So this car comes up next to me and pulls out into the intersection, and right in front of me another car comes blowing through a red light from the other direction and just nails this guy. I mean, nails him. And so obviously I get out, go to the nearest car, trying to check see if everybody's okay. I called 911, reported the wreck and all that. It's raining. But once I realized everybody was basically okay, I was able to help one guy get to the side of the road. His car was still in the intersection, but at least we got him to the side of the road. The cops show up. I'm just standing there in the rain, like twiddling my thumbs, la 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 la. And I'm like, is this guy ever going to come over and get my information?
Right.
So finally I walked up to him and I'm like, officer, I saw this wreck. I know exactly what happened. Do you want my name and number? You can call me later or whatever. He's like, oh, just write it on this sheet of paper. I'll put it in later.
Right.
So I wrote it on a sheet of paper and gave it to him. And I'm like, there's zero chance
Right.
that officer put my name and number in that report, which was unfortunate. I mean, maybe he did. I don't know.
Well, right. And also, too, maybe it was so clear and maybe the person admitted that, yeah, I ran the light or whatever it might be, to where they probably didn't think it was necessary to have a witness listed. But I'm sure that happens plenty of times, because I had a case where the police report said the complete opposite of what had actually happened. And the reason I know that is because I did an open records request to get the body cam from the investigating police officer. And my client, who ended up passing away from the wreck, had literally told the police officer what had happened. And in the report, it was the complete opposite. So, which brings me to another point. A lot of times clients will ask us, hey, this report's wrong. What do I do? What can I do? And I always say, contact the police department. Let them know what is wrong, why you think it's wrong. And a lot of times they'll amend it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and sometimes it's the most obvious things that are wrong, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a section on the report that's going to say whether any injuries were reported, right?
Right.
And lots of times there aren't any injuries reported at the scene, and it's accurate if it says no. But I have literally seen accident reports where somebody was hauled off in an ambulance to the hospital, and it says no injuries reported.
Right.
And I'm like, what?
Right.
The ambulance picked her up from the scene. How do you not have injuries reported, right? Or sometimes it'll say no injuries reported, and you get the body cam footage, and the person's laying there in their cars, almost crying in tears because they're hurting so bad, right? So that's why we always say, even though the accident report is probably the most valuable piece of information to get after a car wreck to get you started on the investigation, it is far from the end-all and be-all of what happened. But you have to be aware of what's in it, because if it says no injuries reported, the insurance company is going to jump on that and say, oh, well, Chase didn't even complain that his back was hurting while he was at the scene. Right. But maybe he did. Maybe you need to get the body cam footage. Maybe you need to get the hospital records. Maybe you get the urgent care records later on to show that, well, yeah, you did actually have some pain that day or the next day or whatever. Right. So
yeah, you bring up a good point, right? It's not the gospel, but it definitely gets you started in the right direction. So.
Yep. So I guess all in all, it's a very valuable piece of information, or very valuable document to get. It's pretty easy to get. It's usually available 3 to 5 days after a wreck. So start there, and even if you have every intention of hiring an attorney, if you can get the accident report before you meet with an attorney, it may be in your best interest to meet with an attorney before the accident report's available. But if you happen to be able to access that before you meet with your attorney, I would highly recommend bringing it into any interview you have with an attorney, so they can look it over and it'll give them a better picture of what they're going to be dealing with if you pursue that case or if you hire them. But you got anything else about accident reports?
I think that's it.
All right, cool. Well, if this video has been helpful to you, give us a thumbs up. If there's any other information that you think would be helpful, especially in states other than Georgia, that might be available on an accident report, go ahead and put those in the comment section below. But otherwise, we will see you next week for our next video.